Hail and hello, everyone. Welcome to the Random Heathen Ramblings podcast, a Midgard Musings production. Join me, Jesse, your host, as we discuss random heathen related topics and various other things in an attempt to find where, if any, heathen worldviews can be applied. You can support this podcast by clicking on the Linktree link in the description or show notes. You can also follow me on all of my social media platforms, including Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and become a patron on Patreon. Join me every Thursday morning at 9 a.m. Eastern, 8 a.m. Central on all major podcast streaming platforms, including Apple and Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Pandora, and many, many more. If you wish to have your voice heard on the Random Heathen Ramblings podcast, you can dial in to 615-671-9832. Thank you all once again for listening to the Random Heathen Ramblings podcast. Enjoy and hail to you all. All right, folks. Hail and welcome to the season 3 finale, the final episode of season 3 of the Random Heathen Ramblings podcast, a Midgard Musings production brought to you by Anchor, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, everywhere that you catch it, wherever you are, however you have absorbed this podcast over the last year in 2022. Thank you so much for being an ongoing supporter. Got some special guests coming in here in just a moment, some of whom you have met before in either previous episodes or just through, association through other platforms, other content. But I'm not going to waste any time in bringing them on here because they deserve to introduce themselves. Like I said, a lot of you have been introduced before. So let's just go ahead and get right into it. So before we do, be sure, if you haven't yet, favorite this podcast, subscribe to this channel, do all the things that the algorithm and whatnot demands for engagement. Appreciate all of your support, and let's go ahead and bring in some of our guests for today's show, the final episode of season 3 of the Random Heathen Ramblings podcast. Right into it. All right, folks. As I mentioned in the intro, we've got some guests joining us today, and some of these faces might ring a bell. They might look familiar for you. Going to go ahead and start with a fellow who I've been friends with now for the last few years. I've met him through some fireside chat Facebook groups and some really fun heathen-related topics and discussion. His name is Richard. So, Richard, go ahead and introduce yourself.
I'm Richard Dissler. I like you said, mentioned, I run a fireside chat on Facebook group. It's bi-weekly chat for heathens. Also, I'm an ordained goatee, and by trade, I'm an industrial electrician.
Oh, right on. And you're in the Kentucky area, right? Or
yes,
in the state of Kentucky, and you got this great, wizardly look going on about you. So that's pretty cool too. So yeah, thanks for joining. You're a first time participant in the podcast. I know you've been catching the show for a while now, and like I said, we've been friends for a good bit. So I appreciate you making yourself available and wanting to be a part of this. So yeah, good to have you on.
Thank you for having me.
Next, I'm going to introduce another new guest on the show who's been listening for some time, and I made kind of like a public post here recently on my social media friends list and asked for anyone that was interested to come on here for the season 3 finale, and we got Bryan here from Ohio. So welcome to the show, Bryan.
First time caller, long time listener. It's true. I've learned a Toledo, Ohio, just outside of Toledo, Ohio, and I'm more or less a practitioner.
We're getting
Things like
yeah. Hold on a second, Brian. We're getting a lot of feedback on your side. There's like it's cutting in and out. I don't know if it's a device thing. Let's start over. So Brian, go ahead. Okay, now you're totally silent. I'm gonna move on. I'm gonna move on to a couple others. You do the same thing that happened before, and we'll get this all sorted out. So next we'll come back to you, Brian. We'll get through that. But we're gonna talk to Josh from Skogar Mayor. There's an intro song at the beginning of my podcast every episode, which is named after my channel, Midgard Musings, and it was written by this guy. So welcome to the show, Josh.
Hey man, thanks for having me back on. It's always a pleasure to chat with you, friend.
Yeah, it's always great to have you. You've been on this podcast. I don't remember exactly when it was, but we were talking about your Father of the Wolves.
Yes.
I don't know what you call it, like outdoors guide or something.
Yeah, it's like outdoors tour guide, man. We're take people outside and connect them back with nature as it should be.
Awesome. So yeah, you've been here on this podcast for at least once before that I can think of, and you've been a longtime friend. We've met in person, years ago when you were doing some band like black metal, death metal type stuff, and now you're doing the Skogar Mayor, Nordic folk or whatever. I guess that would be the right category.
Right. Yeah. I call it ambient, dark Nordic folk. Also storytelling in a way too.
Okay.
A big title.
Well, it's good having you on once again.
Thank you, sir.
Welcome back to the Brian. Can you hear us? Yeah, I'm not hearing you, Brian. Can you try one more time?
Yeah. How about now? Can you hear me at all?
There we go. Yes.
There we go. Okay. All right. Technology is wonderful, isn't it?
I hear you, man. It's one of those great things to deal with. But yes, so you sound great, and I'll turn it over to you to just reintroduce yourself now that everybody can hear you. So
good. About the technical difficulty. For your show, most I'm a practitioner, several years now, but just things I don't with many other learn and learn the hard way of not free through sake of young.
yeah, Brian, I'm gonna pause you there for a second, buddy, because I know you're getting into stuff and it's cutting in and out real bad. Again, not sure why. It's not just me, right? Because everybody else having a tough time.
No, it's cutting out too.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know, man. I hate that. It's like your every other word is cutting in and out, and it's just like it's almost like a bad connection on your end. Let me move up to the final guest, and we'll see maybe if it fixes itself along the way. Again, apologies, but so our other guest and a longtime friend, a brother of mine, he's been on the podcast several times. Welcome to the show, Papa Olofsson of Fjellvetir Workshop.
Hey, thanks for having me on again. It's always a pleasure. I love coming on and talking on the various topics and the different things that you do. It's a great work that you do for the community in Midgard Musings. A lot of people appreciate it and your voice and your thought and what you give back. But yeah, as you said, Papa Olofsson from Fjellvetir Workshop here in the Blue Ridge Mountains of Appalachia, North Carolina. Make drums and rattles, other primitive instruments and runes and all that good Norse pagan heathen type stuff.
Yeah, hell yeah, man. You've actually provided myself with a number of instruments and things that are adorning my space back here. Some of the things that have been introduced on Skogarmayor's project, Josh's project, Skogarmayor. Some I think he's got. Am I correct in saying that you've got some of Papa's instruments on some of your instrumental tracks and stuff? Is that right?
Oh, that's absolutely, man. I have a few items from him, which are my favorites, and then me and him's been in talking of a couple more coming this upcoming year.
Man, like it's like when it comes to his stuff, it's almost like a potato chip. You can't have just one.
You can't,
or,
man. It's
or tattoos. You can't stop at just one. It's addictive, and it's the good kind of addiction, I think.
oh, absolutely.
It's a healthy addiction.
It's a healthy addiction, absolutely.
Yeah, and it's something that when you feed it, it helps out a small business, a pagan owned and operated business, which of course we're all for and about. Yeah, I mean, Papa's stuff has been, and I don't know if the listeners and viewers realize this, but Papa's talents have reached far and wide, not just here in the domestic U.S. Some of you may have heard of this guy who has a project called Dunheim, Danheim, if you want to, however you pronounce it, Dunheim, and Papa, you've provided him with an item or two, I believe, correct? Maybe not. He's just kind of sitting there. He's just kind of sitting there thinking about it. Yeah, his picture's frozen.
It was like he was in deep thought right there.
He was like, did I? I don't know.
Did I? Maybe.
We're just having a great time tonight, just fighting with technology, as it seems.
Yeah,
So.
It kicked me out and then popped me back in.
Okay, we were wondering because like the what we could see on the screen is like you were just like
this,
just frozen in time, just thinking about what I just said.
That was real time. I was in thought. That was
okay.
My stoic look.
Okay, but I was. Did you catch what I was saying about who you've provided instruments for, not just for here in the U.S., but you've there's a guy that people are may know as Danheim, and I believe you've gotten to provide him with an item or two, right?
Yeah, Michael Schaefer's got a commemorative drum that I did for just the general work that he puts together, and some percussion sticks, and get things all over the place.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, he's actually a huge inspiration of mine for my project, man. So to know that both of us have an instrument made by you makes me even more happier.
Then I've got to give a shout out to another brother of mine, Cody, another Schaefer, just spelled a little bit different, for Eldervach, the musical project that he's got working. Fantastic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
he's got a lot of pieces, and he's a very talented individual with any piece that he touches.
Yeah, that's for sure. Even when it comes to his crafting, all the wire wrapped gems and stones and things that he does. My wife has a piece that he made that I commissioned him for her birthday this year. A really nice kind of crescent moon shaped amethyst stone that he did a wonderful job on. So yeah, big shout out to Cody. I'd love to get him on the show. I've actually asked him a couple of times, and whether it's due to scheduling conflicts or just he wasn't ready, just to get out here and talk and stuff, which I totally respect and understand. But Cody, and you watch and listening to this, man, I would still love to have you on this show when and if you're ever ready. So,
and if Cody is listening to this as well, me and Cody have kind of started having a few conversations here and there online. I'm also a huge fan of his project. As there's not many of us Nordic pagan from America artists. but I'm gonna have to drag him out of the state he lives, and we're gonna have to do a tour, Cody. We're gonna have to get together and do a tour, man.
That'd be
Be
sick.
awesome.
That would be. So we're all here, guys, like to some degree, to various degrees. I know we're running into some audio and technical things. Richard, you might be muted. So when and as you're able to say something, just unmute yourself and whatnot. But this is the final episode of season 3 of the Random Heathen Ramblings podcast. And each year is a season. I know different productions divide their episodes and seasons up differently. A lot of them will do it quarterly or semi-annually or whatever, but I've just run every season of the podcast as a year. So season 1 was the first year that I started doing this, and then 2 and 3 thereafter. And this episode marks 45 episodes for the season, which means almost every week for this whole year of 2022 I've produced something. And the guests that have come on, some of you who have of course returned for this, and then new guests and making new friends. It's been a really awesome year, and I just want to first of all thank all the listeners, thank all the viewers for being a part of this, because like Bryan, for instance, hopefully we'll be able to hear you better throughout the podcast, because you were one of the ones that wanted to kind of introduce a topic, as it were, for the ramblings of tonight, which I think is a great one. But you're as you had mentioned with me offline, was have been listening for a while, and as I think you mentioned, first time caller, long time listener, which I laugh about that all the time, because I'm maybe dating myself, but that's when you listen to old like radio shows,
Casey Kasem and
yeah.
So you can hear me now?
That is great. Whatever you did, keep it that way.
I abandoned the laptop and went to the cell phone. That's what I did.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, so you sound great, you look great. And so let me rewind a bit then. And now that you've got a good setup here, introduce yourself, please, Bryan, for everybody.
All right, thanks, Jesse. I've been listening to / watching your podcast since season 1. I think since the very beginning. If I didn't catch you right when you first started, I shortly thereafter went back to the very beginning. So I'm pretty confident in saying I've watched them all. And I appreciate what you do. It really is, like Papa said, it's great for the community of heathens, especially for people like me that are solitary in nature, and I'm a solitary practitioner. I've learned a lot, mostly from all my books. There's a vast wealth of knowledge in books on our religion, but I love the insight that you give, so I appreciate that.
I appreciate you, man. Thank you for saying such. And so again, you mentioned you're a solitary practitioner, or you kind of stick to yourself with it. Is it just, and again, if I'm asking questions that are a bit too personal, you don't care to answer, then just say, I'm gonna table that or whatever. But is it out of choice, or just because of the area that you're in, that there's less or zero that you're aware of, or that you're aware of other pagans of like mind?
It's mostly by choice. I belong to several Facebook groups, not several, a couple. One being in Ohio pagan group where I'm at, Norse pagan group. And there's plenty out there. There's plenty of us out there, especially that are like-minded, that don't distort and manipulate our religion for nefarious purposes, if you know what I mean. And many inclusive groups. I'm very driven. I'm very passionate. My career is very important to me. My family is very important to me, and I love the community. But maybe someday when life settles down a little bit, I'll join a kindred or a tribe and actually practice with some other heathens. But for now, I'm content the way it is.
That's great. I like how you said, certain groups that twist or manipulate things. I recently got told that I twisted the lore to to I forget what the exact words were, but that people had to watch out for what I said, because I twist the lore to my own I don't know, benefit or something. I'm like, it's stories. First of all, it's mythology. How do you whatever, I guess. If I tell a story in my own way, if I give Thor a New York, Brooklyn accent, I guess I'm twisting the, I guess I'm twisting the lore. But that was a
so
weird.
You were also told that you're gatekeeping information by providing information.
Yeah, and
I don't know how that works, but
you learn something new about yourself every day, apparently. So there you go, guys.
Jesse the gatekeeper.
I'm gatekeeping by providing information on things. So there's a new one for you. Yeah.
Well, some could argue that Snorri may have manipulated the lore too. So
Oh yeah, the biggest one of them all, right? But he's the guy that we were supposed to, quote unquote, use as a source material.
Right.
Right. But so yeah, I mean, I think Josh, you're out there in the Kings Mountain area of North Carolina, and Papa, you're in the Blue Ridge, and Richard, you're if you want to unmute and mention you're in Kentucky, we mentioned before, but you've gotten yourself, you have a kindred or sorts, or at least you did at one point in time. Maybe you want to refer to that.
I did at one time. We had some issues I won't get into, but
right.
Currently got a start of a new one, but I also have the Facebook groups. So, and which anybody's free to join them. It's all about putting knowledge out there. We don't twist. We put knowledge out and have discussions. So, in fact, you're in the groups, and we have the video chats every other week, or try to anyway, depending on my work schedule, which has been crazy here lately.
Sure.
And
well, that's all of us, right? I mean, like, we all have our own separate lives, and that's one of the things I wanted to just, again, really thank each of you for, because you all have your own lives. We are all in different time zones, and you found time to come on here and talk about stuff, with me, and for everybody to listen to, and hopefully make it a beneficial thing for those that are, finding their way in heathenry and or paganism in general, because we're all, all of us are probably identify, if we want to call it, as Norse pagans, or at least to some degree have that, the modality, the aesthetic, the approach to how we see the world, our worldviews echo similar ways, but we all practice things differently. Some of us are maybe a bit more animistic, some of us are a bit more I don't know, just various ways of doing things, but we've at least met on some common ground. And that's the nice thing, I think, that social media offers, is it gives people the opportunity to discuss and share ideas, and then if it fits, it fits, and if it doesn't, then it doesn't have to. We don't have to feel that every Norse pagan group out here is something we have to be a part of. And I, for one, am pretty select and careful with which ones I join, just because, again, it can consume us. It can just take up so much of our time and take our focus away from what's really important, our hearths, our homes, our lives, And
I'm the same way, man. I'm very selective about the groups, much like Bryan, I'm a little bit of a solitary as well. And you get in some of those groups, and sometimes I just shake my head at the arguments that's happening and the bizarreness that's going on in them. And I'm like, this is not why I am the way I am, man. I'm here for, peace and respect for, one brother to another. And it's, some of them get a little out of hand for me too, man. So I'm very, very selective.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just saying, with both my outdoor business surrounding, some Norse paganism, and then obviously, my musical project as well, I like to be in those groups so that I could share that. But you always have that one in there that's got something to say, and it's like, no matter what. So
what is if you can think of it, probably the most, I don't know, off the wall argument or thing that you were either a part of or that you just saw and you go, man, this is it, I'm out, because it just like, is there anyone that stands out in your mind?
Well, for me, some of the ones I've seen is where, someone's trying to say they're more pagan than another person. It's like, hey, man, like, it's to each their own, and at what level they want to go down this path. And So for me to sit there and to watch someone, criticize somebody because, they do it differently. I mean, it just gives me a headache, man. And it disappoints me, a little bit there to see it. That's usually when I start seeing that in a group. It's usually when I'm like, all right, I'm out. Like, I'm done.
You're not pagan enough to be here or something like
Yeah,
that.
right.
Yeah.
I had a guy recently, and I actually kind of like the back and forth engagement that I get from this one particular fella. I guess this fella on the Facebook on the Midgard Musings Facebook page. This thing behind me, this banner behind me. He made a comment. He's like, that's not that's not Norse, right? It's Solomonic. It's got Solomon, Hebrew Kabbalism and everything. I'm like, yeah, I know. Doesn't matter though. It was a gift, and it was a gift from a friend, and it's been here for a long time, and it's gonna. And by the way, I also know that the runes that are going around it are out of order a little bit, and that there's a blend of both Elder, Younger, and Anglo-Saxon runes on there too. So I get it, but what's your point?
Right.
It's kind of like, I guess, to whatever degree, it's engagement, and that's how I look at it from. That's how I look at it from a lot of angles, is that I'm getting engagement as a content creator. Engagement is everything. So
Right.
hey, bad, any press is good press, I guess, if you want to look at it in that sort of way. And I'm not out here trying to bend anybody's approach to heathenry or paganism to be my version of it. It's just information sharing and knowledge and stuff. And I'm still learning too. And that's what a lot of this is about, is just sharing of knowledge and getting to learn some things,
Right.
And I'm just going to pause real quick because we have another guest that just joined the podcast. We are recording. So this guy here, he's actually been on several podcasts with me, one of which was while he came out to Tennessee to visit from Missouri. Welcome to the chat, Patrick Walsh, my friend. Can you hear us?
How's it going?
There he is. How is it
There
going?
he is.
Thanks for joining, man. How you feeling?
Not too bad. Just getting ready for the holidays and this brutally cold weather, which I know you're very excited about.
Yeah. Well, we were just we were all just talking, and I'll get into introductions and stuff a little bit, after the fact, because we already kind of got into the meat and potatoes. But we got Papa Olafson here. We've got Josh from Skogor Mayor. We've got a new guest on here. His name is Bryan. We got Richard Disler up in Kentucky, and now we got you. So we got the whole, as they said when I was a kid, we got the whole family here.
The whole damn family.
Yeah. So it's great that you could join, Patrick. You've been, I said, a longtime supporter of the channel, even before I started doing the podcast. I think you were one of the very first few 100 people to subscribe and start watching my videos on the YouTube channel. And it's great that you're still around and that you've come out and visited me here in Tennessee and got to be on a podcast in person. And now here you are on the season 3 finale. So good to have you back.
A pleasure. Yep. Happy to be here.
Yeah. So we were just talking, just to kind of bring you up to speed about practicing heathenry, having, solitary approaches to heathenry. Bryan is a guy that's, chooses to practice by himself, and Josh over here is in North Carolina, and same thing, and we all find ourselves that way. And I think at least at some point in time, I am fortunate to have a small network of people in my area that I've been able to grow really close to and with as an extension of my inner circle, my inner hearth. So they're like family, and from those relationships have blossomed the growth of our tribe, Plurity folk, the people of the Thundering Storm. So it's one thing I was thinking of is, with social media, it's a lot of the reason why we're all here together on this episode is because of social media, so it definitely has its benefits, and if it's leveraged properly and beneficially, I think it can work wonders. It can be the start of a really good thing for us in our respective spiritual growth or our religious growth, because you don't make those friends like that way anymore. It's used to be you would just know the people in your immediate town or surrounding
Right.
areas, and now we've got this wild and crazy social networks, and we can do stuff like this, so it's pretty cool.
Like a virtual Hoff.
Yeah, in a
Yeah.
way. I like that term. The Hof was a central kind of temple, if you want to call it as such, in Scandinavia. Uppsala was one that we know of, the heathen temple at Uppsala, old Uppsala, Sweden, and it was the central gathering place for the public to come and honor, venerate, and worship their old gods. They had very specific things that were done at certain and specific times in Uppsala. I think it's Adam of Bremen who documented the 9-year sacrifices and some of the things that were done up in that area and what it was like, which we were kind of talking around and about earlier about source material. Somebody mentioned Snore. I think it might have been you, Josh, or Bryan. One of his mentioned Snorri Sturluson, and how much people tend to try to call him or use him as a source material. And I say, the one thing that's really wild, I think, that I like to think about with history, any kind of historical stuff, if you're going to take that kind of an approach, is history has always been twisted and bent to make a certain, there's historical facts of whatever, but the person who documented it, the historian, the scholar, the whoever it was that documented it, they're going to have some of their bias leak into that.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, it's kind of like, why are we even going that far back? Why are we trying to reconstruct at times things that were done in ancient times when we're here now in modern times? Why do we find the need to do that, you think? Anybody can feel free to chime in, but it was a question that I was asking myself. Why? What about the past enamors us so much that we want to recreate it or reconstruct it?
Well,
I think, if I could, I think it gives some people a sense of credibility to what they believe. I guess maybe like the Bible would to Christians. It's something that's very, very old, that has documentation, but the reality is in our faith, there really isn't a lot of source material, and the source material that there is, can it truly be trusted based on who wrote it, when it was written, their bias and their views? And I think that the great thing, one of the things that really attracted to me when I was searching for my faith, was the fact that heathenry, Norse paganism, whatever you want to call it, and which is also great because you can refer to it in any way you want, is it largely up to interpretation of the practitioner. I love it in the Facebook groups and the social media when there's arguments of, well, this is the way that you should do it, and that's the way you should do it, because at the end of the day, who's to say who's right? It's not like Catholicism, where there's rituals and practices that everybody does, because quite frankly, much of what we believe we know was lost to history. So credibility, I think, is what people search for when they're looking back to the past that long ago to support their faith.
That, and in all of our social circles and in social media and these groups and these pages, it's always pounded roots. So everybody wants to go back, find those roots, learn about those roots, and build up from there. But people get caught up in the roots alone and forget that we have to have a trunk, and we have to have branches, and we have to have leaves.
True.
This is 2022, not 502. We're living now. So even if you are able to find out 100% through whatever textual information that this is how something was done then, they were living very much different lives than what we're living now. We're not out here farming and plowing with a stick. We're going to the grocery store.
Yeah.
There are ways to honor old ways and old traditions, but we have to remember that we're living now.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm-
Good.
I think it's good to know the old source and for the foundation. But like you said, we are living in 2022, so you got to bridge that gap too. So, that's your foundation, kind of like the foundation of your house. If you don't have any foundation, it's not going to be very strong. You need something. Oh,
I mean, I had somebody even say that the way, and I'm going to paraphrase the way they said it, but the spirit behind what they were saying was that along the lines of, the way that the old gods were approached and the way that the gods were interacted with in ancient times was the way that it worked back then. So how can we expect them to be approachable now unless we're doing it the way that it was done back then? And not to my response to that was, I find it hard to believe, and again, there's no way to back this up through any quote unquote source material, but I find it hard to believe that as humanity has evolved and has progressed and has become more innovative and whatnot over time, that I find it very hard to believe that the sacred and that the divine have not done the same thing to some degree in their own way. Right?
exactly.
So sure, it might be a bit nostalgic. It's kind of like, when, and we're all different age, we come from different generations ourselves here. We got a pretty diverse audience, I think, as far as our guests and even listeners out here. We all come from different backgrounds. There's things that will touch our nostalgic parts of ourselves, right? Like I was talking to my wife last week, and she was asking about like my family's traditions for celebrating Christmas, which we didn't have any because I was very, very young when they abandoned the celebration of Christmas because of religious reasons, right? But I have I have some memories of being a very small kid, and there were some things. I remember having a Christmas tree, and I remember having this one thing. You guys, anybody here, Richard, you might know, Emmett Kelly. Anybody here remember Emmett Kelly? He was a performer. He was a circus performer, and he
Right.
had this. He was a sad clown, and he was he like kind of was the trailblazer for a lot of clown performers and stuff. But I remember my dad having this like figurine. He was about 2.5, maybe 3 foot tall, of Emmett Kelly. His nose would glow and this and that, and it started me going down this memory lane of things that we had around the house that were antique and old, and the nostalgia kicked in, and I go, oh wow, and it really touched a certain part of myself that made me happy and made me feel good. And I think maybe
Right.
that's kind of the same thing with, again, this is my own UPG, but that when, if you learn Old Norse, or if you learn Old Saxon, some of these old dead languages that aren't spoken anymore, and you speak to the sacred, or you do certain ceremonies or rituals in those languages, it's probably almost like the same thing or something similar for them in a way, like, oh, he's speaking my language now. Like I remember that
Right.
from days gone by or wherever. And again, that's my own UPG, but I think maybe there's something to think about with that. And maybe again, there's a part of ourselves that recognizes how it makes us feel, and we maybe live that part out in our ceremonial stuff too. I don't know.
Something I've noticed.
Oh,
Sorry.
go ahead, Patrick.
I was gonna say, I've noticed that it's like almost like a conditioning that we're brought up to believe that if we don't have like some kind of like starting point and practice, as someone did back in the early days, that we lose credibility. And an interesting thing about other faiths, like Christianity and Catholicism is they have a sacred text, and it's very biased. It's created by, you know, men in power, and not really from the source of divinity or anything like that.
That's a good point. These quote unquote sacred texts. Again, it goes back to like, right, the bias. I mean, people want to, you know, Christians especially, what the Bible says. Well, the Bible was written by people who were under the king's retinue. You know what I mean? So you pretty much had to do what the king said or else. You know what I'm saying? And you know, you can make the argument, or they can make the argument that, well, it was divine inspiration. It was, you know, these holy people who were moved or inspired to speak or write. But at the end of the day, like, well, there were certain things that we know were left out of what the current publication of the Bible is. There's books, there's a whole entire, you know, series of texts that were left out of the original manuscripts. Why is that? Were they less were they less inspired with, you know?
Yeah.
So I don't know who's going to say something next. Maybe Papa or whoever. I don't know who's going to say
I
something
was
next.
going to, before we come too far away from Snorri, and I don't mean to sway anybody, but in relation to his credibility, Snorri wore a lot of hats in his time. He served in a lot of positions and done different things, but on his credibility, and this is a fun story that I learned at the Snorri Stafa in Iceland while visiting there. The kind of guy he was, we hear stories from him, but not a lot about him. At one point in time, he was serving under a chieftain there. A couple of ruffians came to town and decided that they wanted to marry, or one of them wanted to marry the chieftain's daughter, and this was a problem. He didn't want that. So he consults Snorri, what do I do? And the answer was to put him to work. We want this road built through town. Let's have them do that if they want to marry your daughter and see if it works. And it did. They busted butt, got it done. Okay, it's time to do it. Well, we lost. They built the road. They're going to marry my daughter. He's going to marry my daughter. What do I do now? Well, ask them for something even more impossible. We want this this hot spring, this sort of grotto type thing. We've got it nearby, but it needs dug out. Get them in there to dig that out, and then now you've got a road and something that other people are going to come to, bring business to the town. He gets them in there to do that. Didn't think they were going to finish, but they did. And he says, now what? The guys are on their way out. They dug this thing. So he takes a big stick and beats them over the head as they're coming out of this hole and ends the whole thing. And guess who marries the chieftain's daughter a short time thereafter? Snorri. See, he was very about his own rise and his own gain, and anything that he was doing.
And he froze again.
And whether it be the stories that he passed down or the marriages. He was sly, he was slick, but maybe not the most honest.
Yeah. So there's, you know, I mean, who is anymore, or who was back in the day? You know what I mean? Like there's a weird dichotomy to this whole concept of you know, honesty and honor and all of that. It was a different time, 1,000, 1,200, however long years ago, you know, and those things meant something different a little bit back then, you know, like if it meant that you had to lie or twist things around for the betterment of your own, then that was good for you, and it was good for your inner, and there was I think an inherent understanding of inner versus outer. You know, there's maybe nothing of particular ancient origins about inner yard, outer yard, but it definitely has, you know, ancient world views, is that, you know, what's within is sacred, what's within is order, what's within is lawful, what is within is good, and what is without is subject to kind of the laws of the jungle, right? The laws of the wild. It's anything goes. So there's a problem with reliving that or reconstructing that now and today. It's you know, the world's not quite so not much like that in a lot of ways anymore. There's a lot of gray areas, it seems.
It's a lot more complicated.
Limitations too.
Mm,
And
Yeah.
communities are different. If you live in an apartment building or an apartment complex, you have no say in who becomes your next door neighbor. Whereas back then, you knew exactly who your next door neighbor was because you've known their family for generations and generations. There
Yeah,
was almost
their
a
land was
built-in trust to your neighbor,
right.
whereas now your neighbor is more a stranger.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sense
Very
of
true.
community is different, but Innengard, Utengard,
Right. Now that kind of was a neat segue into a topic that Bryan was actually going to is the reason why we wanted to talk about this, and it goes into some discussion with I think maybe I don't know, Bryan, if you want to take the lead on this, but ancestor veneration, but also the importance of the Vatir, the land Vatir, the Hus Vatir, the localized spirits that we share space with and coexist with.
Yeah, yeah. When you did the episode on ancestral veneration, it really it keyed a part of my belief that I have had for quite a while, and I think that I'll probably, like a lot of new heathens, when I was new, I placed a lot of emphasis on the gods, the Aesir, the Vanir, Odin. I know on social media a lot of people say that they have a strong connection with one god or another god, and that's great. That's fine if that's how they choose to practice. But as I've progressed along kind of in my knowledge and my beliefs and stuff, I've found that a really commonly overlooked aspect in our faith is one, the veneration and of our ancestors, who are still with us even in death, from Helheim or wherever they may be, that they're still with us. And then also, like you said, the Vatir, the Husvatir and the Land Vatir, the spirits of the house, the inner dwelling and of the land. In my practice, as a solitary practitioner, I probably give more veneration, do more ritual, and offer more sacrifice to the Vatir, because I believe that they are more invested in my fortune than the gods. I believe that the gods are largely selfish, if I could say. Some of them are very, very self-serving, and they would help human beings here on Midgard if it served them. But our ancestors and the Vatir are much more invested in us and our well-being, and are much more willing to aid us in things that we cannot accomplish ourselves, than the gods may be. That's why I really wanted to bring up that topic, to see what you gentlemen had to say about that and give some insight.
That's something that's typically overlooked a lot, because the primary focal point seems to be the beings of power, like Odin, Thor, and Freya. But that's something that I personally, after hearing that, would like to take a more closer look at, because I'm kind of one of those guilty people who where I often negate and overlook the moments where I have spiritual epiphanies, or a special moment is more often not with the Lambetir, where I see a sacred animal like a hawk or a deer, or just the trees themselves, and being in that atmosphere where you feel you can escape whatever is bothering you, or find that source of inspiration that you've been seeking. And often, more so often than not, these special moments are something that are organic. It just happens, rather than something you're trying to force, like a ritual, or
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna jump in here real quick, unless anybody else had to say something. There's a place for it all. There's definitely a place and a time for the sacred to be involved, and we see this repeated in again, we talk about source material or whatever, it was, what we do know of is that when the gods were involved, there were people there. There was a community. There was a larger gathering, because the gods were tribal. The people were tribal, first of all. So it makes sense that they would see their higher beings as being structured in the way that their society was structured too. So you had tribes of the gods, and the stories reflect the lifestyles that people lived back then, and the way things were done for the betterment of the groups and of the society as it were at that time. One of the other things that we do also know of in some material is that, the localized gods, the house, you would call it the Husvatir. Another name for that I've seen is Kofgod. The actual guardian of the home was a deity, a sacred part, a spirit of the sacred that would kind of go with the family. So if they left, it would go with them, and they would have to kind of set up its own altar, its own sacred space in the home again to make it comfortable and ensure that the protection that deity offered was still there, and that they would still get those things. And I think we see that now in today with some of, like I say, the Husvatir, whether it's how it manifests, how they make themselves known, over whether it's through our little totems or little, call them idols or whatever, god poles. I've seen some people use kind of like the Nisa. Common word is gnome or that sort of thing. They immortalize, they I would say deify, but they put the sacred being into the form of something, whether it's again a god pole or whatever, and then that's their focal point, and that's who they gift to regularly, offer to regularly, so as to make sure that the area that they live in is protected and well kept. And then of course the Vatir of the land are those living entities that exist in the spirit of the wild around us. Like Patrick's saying, the hawks, the various spirits that we all share space with. Go ahead, Papa. I was rambling on a bit. But
the thing that caught me that they all share is that we engage in exchange with them throughout ritual or offering or whatever it is we do, set up an altar or a place or recognize and acknowledge or spend time with them. It's all an exchange, and an exchange is relationship. And relationship, to me, I think, is the most fundamental part in practice when it comes to any sort of veneration, whether it be your ancestors, the Landvatir, the Husvatir, and so on. It's a working relationship.
it definitely is, and I like to think of relationships as sometimes you have good ones and sometimes you have bad ones, even with people, right? And I don't think that we could maybe neglect that possibility with the unseen, right? The things that we don't have
when
vision.
Husvatir are neglected, they become spiteful, and all of a sudden you've got things falling over or out of place, and all kinds of stories that reflect that.
Yeah. Have you guys, anybody here, have you ever had an experience like that? I do, but I don't want to be the first one to say. Have you guys ever had an experience where, you felt like your Husvatir were maybe feeling a little bit neglected?
Yeah, usually my stuff disappears around here when we forget about them or they start feeling neglected. And now they'll pop up randomly, I myself, we have what, three altars inside and one outside now.
So you forget about you neglect your Husvatir, and then they take some things or whatever.
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying? Yeah.
Yeah. Stuff that are real obvious too, stuff that's usually normally right out in the open. They just go poof.
Interesting.
Yeah, I think that I've experienced it before, looking back, but not so much since I became a follower of the faith. Looking back on my life, I could see where I had experiences like that, but I'm fairly diligent in honoring. I have several altars in my house too, and outside. Spend a lot of time outside, both in the yard and in my workshop, and I have small places to make offerings all the time. So I try not to be a neglectful mortal.
What about you, Josh? You're talking too much.
Sorry there. Yeah, man, same, man. I have some altars as well, and I spend a lot of time outdoors to reconnect as much as I can. And this year for me, it may seem musically side things have been going great, but personal wise, I've been going through troubles like anyone else. And I tell you something that really kind of hit me hard this year. Was I'd been going through a lot of stuff, and then my son's 14th birthday, I had to put his beloved dog down on his birthday, and we've had that dog for literally 13 years, and I think I even had made a post. I was just like, what did I do to endure this, and I had to sit back a minute and think on myself, like, man, I have been so focused on so much other things. And I felt like that was a wake up call for me, that I had to kind of sit back, because that hurt, man. It was a really hard day, not only for myself, but my family, especially my son. This was his dog. So yeah, man, I think that one was a little bit of the wake up call for me, is like, hey man, you've kind of been away for a little bit. So, take it the way I could and move forward.
Oh, thanks for sharing that bit of a intimate moment, like that's powerful. And it opens a window to our souls that are it opens up a vulnerable part of ourselves, when we share stories like that. So thanks for sharing.
Yeah, man, it was we're all men here, man, and my son looked at me, he's like, Dad, I don't think I've ever seen you cry. I was like, I'm like, who knew it would take a freckled little chihuahua to make this happen? But but it was a lot, man. It was, like I said, there's a lot of things had been going on with my life, man. And when I had to do that moment, it just all hit me at once. And it was like, wow, it's and I ended up that weekend, man. I spent a lot of time outside, man, and reconnecting, trying to find myself, a little bit more.
Yeah. Takes that time, to it does. Sometimes it's that's what's needed,
Right.
One particular thing that I remember happening, and it was so we have, like I think a lot of us do, we have pets, house pets, and it may not necessarily be this for everybody, but for us, our Vatir are manifested in a lot of times through the animals in our home, so if the animals in the home are upset, it's for us, at least here, it's a reflection into the state of the home itself, like kind of use that as a gauge, and try to do the best we can to make sure that they're comfortable, that they're taken care of, that they're treated well, and that they're loved and all that. And as a general rule, we keep a pretty peaceful abode, and I like to think that it's our work as people, but also recognizing and acknowledging the unseen that manifests itself through the scene, through these
Right.
spirits that we coexist with and that manifest themselves. But I remember this one time I had some, I don't know, spices or seasonings or something out on our counter, and there was something going on. I don't even remember the exact circumstances, but there was some turmoil, right? And then the spices that were on the counter just got tipped over and pushed off of the off of the counter space. And I'm like, these were jars of spices, like not like savory spices, but like hot, like capsaicin spices, like Reaper
Right.
stuff, like really spicy things. And it just got like randomly knocked over and just rolled off the thing. I'm like, why? Like there was no physical presence that I could see, obviously, that could have gone over there and just knocked over a jar of Reaper flakes, and
Right.
I'm like, and again, are things like that all the time meant to be signs or omens? I don't think so. One of the things I see a lot of the time is, people automatically think that if they see a pair of crows flying over them, that it's
Yeah.
Odin, or they
Right.
they try to, like, I don't know if it's forced or if they just, hey, crows do what crows do, and birds do what
Right.
birds do, and all the wild does what the wild does. And it doesn't necessarily mean that every single time you see that particular thing that it's an omen or a sign, but there are times when it could and it might, but it lies on that person in what's going on for that individual, or what's happening in their lives, if whether or not the sign is there to be seen, because what happens for one person is meant for that person or for those people. It's not
Right.
always going to be the same for everybody. So, for me at that particular time, that was a sign, that was an omen that I read as saying there's somebody who's not happy here. And
Right.
they're
Right.
making a mess, they're kicking things
Right.
over, and they're making themselves known as, hey, you got some work to do here. We're not happy,
Right. And I love how you brought up the crow reference, man, and I'm on the opposite side of that spectrum, man. If I see crows and ravens, I'm like ecstatic.
Mhm.
I get it, like brings joy to me to observe them in nature and listening to them talk. Last weekend, me and my wife were doing a vending, and we were set up outside, and I watched I watched a group of crows just fighting over a piece of bread. And I was just sitting there like laughing. I'm
Yeah.
like, wow, these but then there's the people that are, they think that brings all bad luck. But I'm
Right.
totally opposite, man. I just enjoy watching them and love hearing them talk to each other.
I got a raven at work at every day at lunchtime. He's out there waiting on me. Out back by the area I work in. I go out back to smoke, and that's my smoke area. He's been there for about, I guess, about a little over a year now. I've been
Nice.
every day. I take him a little part of my lunch and share it with him. So
Yeah, he's got you on the clock, man. He knows when to show up.
yeah,
Yeah, they're super smart, man.
Oh, man, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I had a pied crow as a pet for a good while. I had adopted her. She was about 7 years old when I adopted her, man. And after, having that as a pet, I really got to see just how intelligent those creatures are. The funny thing is, she became my guard bird, man. No one in the family nor my wolf dog could come in the room if I was in the room and she was out, because she would just attack everybody but me. But she was great to have, man. We would play games, and I would try to hide quarters and stuff from her, and she would just go find them and bring them back. And I would sit there with a guitar and would work on riffs, and she would run up and down the fret helping me play, man. They're very interesting birds, man. And I grew up with a mom that liked parrots, and and having her was like a whole nother thing, man. And they love attention, so that's something cool about them.
Yeah, they have that ability to also, like you mentioned, parrots, like Corvus, the birds. They have that ability to mimic speech and
Yes.
and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, she would she I taught her how to death metal growl, which was so cool. like we would just roar at each other, man, all the time. But she would actually talk, but she was very shy about it. So like you would be in the other room of the house, and then it sounded like a little old lady was hiding in my basement, like chattering away. Like and then you walk in the room, she just sit there and be all quiet. Like I didn't say nothing.
Wasn't me.
Yeah. Yeah, they're definitely, man. But their words are very clear too, man. If you get them to talking, so
Yeah. Well, for you, it's the crows or the ravens, right? For me, it's the heron. Again, I live on a river, basically close to the Stones rivers. So is it uncommon to see herons here, there, and everywhere? No, but when I see one, it doesn't really even matter where they are, I just get all giddy and excited because there's a spiritual connection that I have
Right.
with the heron, you know. So for again, it's I think each individual experience is meant for those people and for that person that's not meant for others, you know. I think Patrick, you even have some similar things with it with the hawk. I think it's for you.
As of recently, for me, it's been the deer.
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
there's been this sacred place I've been frequenting for about over before I started actually pursuing, Norse paganism, but really started to engage in this path and really, apply to my life. The more I came to this place, the more special it became, and I would always see these deer. And when I was younger, I always thought deer were kind of skittish, but then when I really stepped outside that stereotype, I really started to really see them more as like, majestic creatures, and who is a symbol of sacredness. And
Yeah.
after being in this place for so long, I finally found a deer carcass. Good, like 6 months before I finally had the privilege of collecting a deer skull, and then some other bones to set up on my altar. Actually, really quick, I'll show you guys my deer
Yep.
skull that I got right over here. I'm not sure if you can see it or not.
Yeah,
If I'm
that's-
talking,
Yeah.
it's in good
of course,
shape, man.
thank you. And also, as you mentioned, the hawks too, though, that's always been something. And anytime I see one, actually, it's funny because today when I went to Walmart to get some gifts, I see this hawk flying over, and just immediately I stopped what I was doing, and just like, oh gosh, hello. It was very special though.
For me, it's bald eagles. I live in an area where they're coming back, and I see one just about every day. I'll see one, and it might be the same one because they have quite a huge territory, but every day I see it, and I get filled with joy. I love to see them. For one, I find like a spiritual connection to it, but for another, just knowing that at least that part of nature is coming back in this area. We're starting to get otters back. I saw a mink the other day, so we're starting to get those. The red foxes are coming back.
Wow.
So in this area that I live on, right by Lake Erie, we're really, really blessed and fortunate to have a lot of the spirits of the land coming back and thriving and whatnot. It's really great to see.
That is awesome.
By Lake Erie,
Yep.
live too far away from there. That's cool.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
don't have bald eagles too much here in the Carolinas. They're here, but they're rare. And I actually, for my outdoor business back over the summer, had took a group out kayaking, and one flew over, and I almost had a panic attack because I was like, I have never seen one here. I never seen them until I got into Midwest. So seeing them here in the Carolinas, and for him to be flying over the river while I was, giving these people a tour on how they kayak down a river, it was amazing to see that. They're beautiful creatures.
Yeah.
How about you, Papa?
Well,
This is like your I mean, you live it. It's
Yeah.
it's-
I feel they come and go. They change. I've made connections with lots of different animals in different times when there's been something along my path that I needed to learn or to work on, and sometimes it's presented by the elk or the fox or the hawk. But I think the one that has stayed throughout is the raven. I actually have that tattooed on my head here. That's who stayed for me throughout my entire path and journey, and more of a companionship in that relationship by spirit than just acquaintance or familiarity that you might find as you have these encounters or experiences with other spirits that have something to teach or to show at the time.
Yeah, and I mean, there's, myself, thanks to your handiwork, the drum that's, right here in the back, the small one, that's a bison skin drum. I have the big one that you guys can see kind of partially behind me here, that's made of goat. And the rattle that is kind of poking its hammerhead above the bison drum is made of bear skin.
Yep.
And so there's all different kinds of things that when we for at least for me, when we use these instruments, or when we use these tools, when we incorporate these items into our practices, it's you almost can't help but kind of drift into this trance-like state of connecting with the spirit of that animal and everything that it means. I mean, sure, my philia is a heron, and for my spirit work, that's the form that I take for those types of activities. But the ferocity of the bear, and the tenacity of the bison, and the agility of the goat. I mean, just all these things that you can come up with and think of when you, I don't know, partake of their remains, in this way. It's a really a wild thing. And I mentioned early on in the podcast, before some of you came on, about animism. For me, in my growth and in my progression in heathenry, so much of where I've gravitated towards over the years has led me down this path of animism, and connecting with the spirits of the land that I exist with and around. And it's become such a wholesome lifestyle with that I didn't have to force. It was just already there, and it was just ready to be tapped into. I don't know how you guys have experienced that, but it sounds like from everybody's comments that there's a little bit of that element in all of us.
Still very awesome and really cool is I was thinking the weeks leading up to when I was going to go visit you. I remember I was telling you I was taking pictures when I go on my little walks around my lake, and I'd be like, "Oh, Jesse, check this out! I see this heron." Really cool is like the spirit of you was there, preparing and getting me ready to make that journey to come visit you. That association and that spirit with me when I go for these, nature walks,
I remember that. I remember you sharing that with me before you came out here, and it was an omen for the both of us. In a way, you shared it with me, and I said, I'm just there making sure you're all right and making sure you're ready for the journey, but it was like kind of a neat thing that, you had that, association that you kind of put towards me. And I, of course, felt that as well. And so, yeah, it's stuff like that, these types of meetings, these types of engagements, start with a conversation or a friendship over long distance. And then who knows what it can become. I mean, Josh, you up there in Kings Mountain recently had a chance to, share in a personal relation meeting with a lot of really good people, Papa included,
Papa included, man. And that was very wholesome for me, man.
And how did it all start?
Right. Well, a lot of it had to do with you. I met Papa through you, and then me and Papa started engaging in conversation, and he invited me into his home, man. And I met a lot of his friends, and now I have more people I can call friends. And down here, like me and Bryan have both in the same situation of being in solitary, man. It was nice to be around kindred spirits. And I honestly, man, that was the biggest smile I think I've had on my face in a long time. And someone actually captured a picture of us with some cigars and me smiling, and I was like, no one ever captures a picture of me smiling. Like, how did they catch it? I didn't even see it. And then Papa shares it, and I'm like, damn you, Papa. I don't smile.
You can smile.
The beard hides it.
The beard, yeah, man. And seeing Richard's beard makes me want to grow back my big beard I had, man.
He's
that
so
thing's-
he's like Saruman over here, or Gandalf even. You know? It's so
I know. I just trimmed mine too, and I'm feeling bad about it.
I'm in the company of such great beards, and then I'm over here just like, you know, nothing. Well, you know, I got all this to
Well, yeah,
make up for it,
I
but
got
you know,
little.
you probably got you probably got it all like braided down your chest and everything too. I bet you're just one of those
No.
wildebeests or something, man.
He's got his back
Actually,
hair
mine's
braided.
getting thin. Mine's actually getting thin and starting to fall out.
Yeah, tell me
Everything
about
but
it.
my beard. Oh.
That's why he likes the bald eagle.
Yeah, it's a euphemism.
That's
It's a-
great.
You know,
Well, guy-
I
Yeah.
think that the reason why I tend to lean towards the Landvatir so much, you know, as we're having this conversation, it's kind of occurring to me that there, because the representation of these Landvatir within the animals and the land and the trees and the rocks and everything, it's a tangible representation of the spirit world. It's something that I can see,
Yeah.
that I can touch in some cases, you know, and maybe that makes it easier for me to find a connection to, rather than the mystical that we cannot see with our eyes. You know, I that kind of just wanted to share that thought as it occurred to me.
It's a good
Admire that a lot.
observation.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead, Patrick.
I have to say, and I really respect and admire that too, because it's kind of one of the reasons I don't really like go to Odin that much, is I hold it as a very sacred, you know, time, and you know, a moment where I really feel to invest myself fully, rather than the day to day and mundane would be more appropriate to go towards, you know, the Landvatir or, you know, the house, you know.
Well, yeah, and it's you know, to like, I think Bryan mentioned it earlier. It's they're more, you know, there's one thing I've been thinking of this whole time, and I can't remember the exact stanza or the exact saga, but I want to say it is in the saga of Egil Skallagrimsson, where the ships that would come in and stuff, they would cover those dragon-headed things on the front of their ships when they would come into port, because it would scare, they were worried about scaring the Vitir. They were worried about scaring the spirits of the land, and they didn't want to do that because it was bad. You know, the Vitir were there as protectors and guardians and such. So they had, you know, those people had a sense of, you know, being on the good side of the Vitir as much as you could. So again, it's more tangible. It's the spirits that we exist with and around on a day-to-day basis. The gods are in the sacred realm, and they are not interacting with our day-to-day stuff on a personal level to any degree, you know. And when it's time to engage with the gods, when it's time to appeal to the gods, it's done in a very ceremonious way, and it's done in a very religious way, and it's done with other people. And not to say that it can't be done on an individual level, because again, I feel that it can be. There may not be specific sources that say it, and we already talked about the validity of all that and why we feel we need to reference sources. But just as a disclaimer, right, like, we know for a fact that when the gods were engaged and stuff, it was done on a communal level with other people, whereas everything else going on day to day, you know, individually perhaps was more localized. And that's with, you know, the lifestyle that people lived. They were sharing space with, you know, the creatures on the land, all the critters,
And a lot of
all the
people are
crawlers.
still honoring that even to this day, and in more ways than what we think. In Iceland, and not just the Icelandic Alsatrur, or those believing in that, but if you look at the Icelandic kroner, their form of currency, on one side of it, you'll find an emblem that features a giant, a dragon, an eagle, and there's one other, I think it's a serpent. No, it's a bull. a
Yeah.
dragon, a bull, a giant, and an eagle. And that goes back to a story that while they were sailing before Iceland was settled, they attempted to um, get ship near land to go in and explore, but they sailed up and they were chased away by a giant with an iron staff that came down. So they sailed around some more and were chased away by an eagle. And then each of these things were the land Vizier protecting the island. And so they still honor that story and the land Vizier to this day on their currency. And it's not just
That's
the
pretty
people
cool.
following also true, but I mean the currency is there for all the people. It's just an agreed upon thing there. It's not
Mhm.
a faith thing. It's just a common belief that they all share.
Yeah, they keep some of their country's traditions, their people's traditions alive in just some of the most mundane ways. We've gotten away from that largely here in North America. You know, I mean,
Yeah.
I'm glad to hear, like, at least with us here today, you know, talking about the importance that we each place on it. And like Bryan, you know, you're saying that, you know, some of the animals that have either left the area or have been sparse are returning. Yeah, that's a good sign. That's a good omen. Something's working. Something that's being done in the background. Whatever, you know, however the collective group of people, when enough rocks get thrown into a pond, you know, you make enough ripples, you make enough waves, things happen. There's this effect, they call it the butterfly effect, whatever. But you know, there's a reactionary thing that happens, and I feel, you know, if one drum is beaten, it doesn't resonate so loudly as if 100 drums are beaten and 1,000 drums are beaten, or 10,000 feathers are waved, and it creates this storm or whatever. And when there's more people doing these types of things, and hopefully conversations like this are sparking that fire to be ignited, and allows stuff like what we're talking about to happen, to get us back to a point, again, not retract, not to go back so far that we're, you know, not being progressive, but that we're getting back to a point of wholesome and holistic existence as a species. Because, you know, we've done some really wacky shit over the years to ruin a lot of stuff, man. And maybe some of what this type of activity is causing is positive reinforcement, positive action to, you know, make a change and make a good difference. At least I like to think so.
Yeah.
Point you made is that you're mentioning it's like, I feel like a lot of people get the idea that back in the early days that people have more sacred, you know, union with the gods rather than we do now. But I think that's partially true, but also an illusion, because I feel like the gods could be more present than ever if, you know, individually or as a whole, that we make that effort to make it, you know, present and more, you know, palpable.
Well, to that point, I would say that there's, again, it goes back to how the gods were engaged in stuff on the communal levels, because again, you know, when people get together and make a boon or make a boast or do something, it you know, it resonates louder. So you're going to grab the attention more so, you know. So with all of the things that are being done, I think, again, it has the same impact, or could potentially have the same impact. Where we're trying to make a difference here, man. Like, we're trying to make good changes. We're trying to get back to, you know, maybe our roots, but to, you know, again, enforce the good and use those known methods to perpetuate that wholesome and that holistic approach, and give everybody's a chance for a better future.
And I don't think that it's so much a return to our roots. I mean, I think a lot of practitioners of the faith come by way of that, but I think it's a return to values is what I think you're saying, you know. And much like the animals that I mentioned that are coming back around and are starting to flourish again, you know, Norse paganism, heathenry is flourishing too. And I will never ever talk poorly about another faith. I just because I don't believe in another faith or don't agree with it personally doesn't mean that it's wrong for the individual. But I will say that other religions in this world are having an all-time low participation. Christianity, people aren't going to church like they used to. Buddhists and Judaism, they're faithful, their numbers of their faithful are diminishing, while ours are actually flourishing. And I think that speaks to the communal aspect of our religion, to the connection with the land, to the connection to our ancestors, the connection to the gods, and the connection to our communities. You know, and I did mention that I'm a solitary practitioner. However, you know, with the use of social media and stuff, and I've been able to connect with other people on this virtual level. And I think that you hit the nail on the head, really, that we're by and large just trying to do good in this world by our families and by our fellow, you know, men and women, really. And that's what it represents to me, anyways, the increase in this faith that by all intents and purposes should have been wiped out from history by, you know, the Christian invasion, but for some reason it survived, and here we are in the 21st century, you know, following the gods of our ancestors.
That observation, I just want to point that out. You know, it's really cool.
Thank you.
I would like to touch on the subject while we're going on it. The influx and the popularity now that's come along, and the mass of people venerating the gods or a deity.
I would love for you to say more.
Versus why and how it was done in our earliest sources. We don't have those same reasons now. Freyr, when we talk about who was venerated and when and why, they were farming communities, farming culture, and crop was life or death. You were either going to starve or you were going to make it through the winter, and it all depended on your growing season. So the Vanir, Freyr especially, were venerated, and offerings were made, sacrifices were made. But we're not doing that now. We're not farming anymore. We're going to the grocery store. We're not going out and fighting our next door neighbor's family with our family to need to hail Tyr for victory or Odin for war. I mean, we're not walking across the chain link fence line with swords and shields. I mean, so
well, maybe you're
were
not,
different
but
then.
no, I'm just
Some of
Things
us
were
are ready
different
to.
Some may want to do that, but we also live in a society with law. And
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah,
I'm
those
headed
things
right for
too.
that chain link fence.
We're civilized now.
So when you're venerating the gods, or you're seeking the gods, or you're wanting to make offering, remember to ask yourself why. You might have intention there, but what is the purpose?
Yeah.
If this is going to be genuine, if this is going to be wholesome, if this is going to be organic, you need to be able to answer those things.
Yeah.
That's a great point. That is a really great point. And also I'm of the I have the idea, the belief that I also ask myself before I ask a deity or a spirit for anything, if it's something that is within my power to achieve of my own volition. And if the answer is yes, that I can, then I do, I try, I persevere. Not always though, you know, I have stumbled, I have failed, I have asked for help, and then I've succeeded after that. So I do believe that there is much to be said about making offerings and asking for something, a gift for a gift though.
Yeah. 100%. You know, it's not so much, can you do this for me? It's, hey, I need a little bit of backup here.
That's where our
You know,
ancestors come in.
Yep. Because to that point, yeah, like exactly like Papa, that's where your ancestors come in, because they've been here. They're the ones. They're the reason why we're here. First and
You
foremost,
want
I
to
mean,
see
if
us succeed.
yeah, they do. They absolutely do, because it touches back on this particular path and our the importance that we place of, we talked about ancestor veneration. Well, why is it such a big deal? Why do we focus so much on it? Well, first of all, again, they're the reason why we got here, and we want to add to Orlog. We want our current deeds and our current luck to feed the well, to give a boost to the next generation, to the next line, however it comes, whether it's through fostering, whether it's through birth, whether it's through friendship and kinship ties of sharing of, the gifting exchange with one another. I mean, this is how it's done here and now in the modern day, and that's, it's, for me, it's, I don't have children of my own, but I have children and I have friends who are every bit family to me. And I want what I do now to be something that they can, tap into as luck later on down the line. And as an ancestor, as I'll become one day, I'll damn sure be invested in their success too. And I will want to see them succeed, just as I know my ancestors want to see me succeed.
I think Bryan said it very well earlier when he pointed out that there's a vested interest that comes from our ancestors that is not present from deity or from gods or goddesses.
Yeah.
They have no reason, but our family, our ancestors have every reason.
So I thought this would be a really nice thing. And it's getting to a point now, I think that, for the sake of absorption for everybody listening and watching, that this is a great point in time to look at wrapping the podcast up for the season, for the year, for this episode. And I can't think of a better way to wrap it up than to, in a virtual way, okay, have a sort of sumble-ish. And I want this to just be something, a focus on boasts of healing of ancestors. Speak of a great deed. Speak of something that has happened for each of you here in 2022 as we wrap up season 3 of this podcast. What boast can you give that hails your ancestors that you have been able to accomplish this year that you would be willing to share with the viewers and the listeners today? And I'll start with I'll start with you, Josh, if you don't mind. I'll put you on the spot, man.
Put me on the spot.
We'll go. We'll start with you, Josh, and then we'll go to Richard. We'll go to Bryan, Papa, and then we'll wrap up with Patrick. How's that sound?
Well, first and foremost, I do come from an ancestral line of musicians. And this year was my first year branching out after 20-something years to taking my musical journey and going solo. And hold up, Papa, are you ready to say my band name for me?
We can do that.
Yeah, because Papa says it better than anybody in the world. So go ahead, Papa, say my band name for me, please, sir.
Skogarmel.
God, that's sexy. So yeah, I branched out solo, and I started it actually 2 years ago, but this year I finally have some success with it. And my new album, The Rune Sagas, is coming out on the 30th this month, and it is coming out via Inner Demon Records, which I am honored to be a part of that family. And it was a long journey to get there. And to be on a record label is just a blessing in itself. So
beautiful. Go ahead, Richard.
Well, I guess my biggest boast for this year have been being 7 years at my current employer, Ford, and the fact that now I'm the officially the subject matter expert and the lead for the sealer line in the paint department. I've been something that all my ancestors, my grandfather was an electrical engineer for GE, so yeah, and everything. So it's something that he'd been real proud of.
That's great. Thank you for sharing. And how about you, Bryan?
I stumbled a while back and struggled really, really hard. it's a story for a different time, really. But this year, I worked really hard professionally, and I'm the director of my company. And just last month, I celebrated 9 months sober, or I mean 9 years sober. Sorry, 9 months,
Oh,
9 years
congratulations.
sober.
Wow.
You
Congratulations.
know, and which again is another story for another time, but it's kind of how it brought me to the faith. So, but that would definitely be it, man. Achieving my personal and professional goals. It's been a great year.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Mm.
All right, Papa.
For me, it's going to be Olaf Heimfield Olafson, or Heimfeld, Homefield. He was the son of a potato farmer who was the son of a potato farmer and potato farmer and potato farmer, but he decided that his calling was a little bit different, and he went into medicine and graduated as a doctor at the age of 18 in Sweden, and decided to bring his practice to the United States and landed in a little town called Bean Station, Tennessee. And that's the entire reason that I've got to live and experience this amazing place called Appalachia. It's all owed to him answering that call and making that big move. So I have to always honor him.
Beautiful. Thank you. All right, Patrick, who you got? What do you got?
All right, my boast this year, travels to see my favorite musical groups. My comfort zone, and pushing myself to, you know, coming to see you. It's like I was having car issues, and, you know, ended up getting COVID on the way back. And I probably had that prior to seeing you, but just you know, just really happened, really meant something a lot to me. And then also I was working a lot with improving my mental health and my daily habits, and you know,
We've all had a really, I mean, everybody's story has been really compelling. You know, each of your accomplishments, each of your victories, each of the things that you've sown in your respective actions, and you know, it's an honoring of your own selves, right? You've done yourself good by doing all the things that you've said you've done and accomplished this year, and reflecting on those victories, I think, is important, and stating those, you know, small wins, no matter how big. It doesn't have to be a big thing. It doesn't have to be a major accomplishment, but count your victories and use them to drive us into further greatness. And again, it is a boon to our ancestors, because without them we wouldn't be here. So it's a great opportunity, I think, for all of us to walk away from as 2022 comes to a close. You know, we're getting into a mindset, a lot of us, of really going inward to our respective families, homes. There's a lot of feasting and gatherings coming up for a lot of us, you know, and you know, for me, I'll just say that there was a lot that happened this year for my personal growth, for my professional growth in my own job, and my spiritual growth. So multifaceted, many victories. And, you know, as we come into the end of 2022 and look forward into 2023, let's each of us count our victories. And this goes for everybody listening and watching too. You know, as you've heard from all of the guests today and myself about things that we want to boast about or speak well of, and give credit to our ancestors and ourselves for these things, do the same for yourselves, right? Share those conversations with your nearest and dearest. Tie that amount of weird together, because kind recognizes kind. You know, iron sharpens iron. There's so many different, you know, fire ignites fire. different phrases, different ways that you can put it, but you'll really, I think, find a great thing and a benefit in recognizing the greatness in yourself and talking about this with other people and then, you know, feeding off of each other's greatness and accomplishments. For a lot of us, you know, Yule is coming around here soon, and you know, Yule was traditionally a midwinter bloat for starting to think about crops and thinking about starting to plant your crops for the upcoming growth season. You know, we've made it through one of the harshest points of the year. We're midway through. The light is at the end of the tunnel. We ain't died yet, right? We hadn't starved. We haven't frozen, right? All the things that our ancient ancestors had to think about. We're thinking of it in a little bit in a different context now. And there's a lot of things that we've been able to do this year that we can use to fuel for the upcoming year. And I would encourage everybody here as guests and friends, and then also listeners and viewers and supporters to use this time of year to think about the crops that you're going to be planting, the things that you're going to be doing in the days, the weeks, and the months to come to honor your ancestors, to honor yourselves, and to go out and be great, achieve great things to whatever degree. Doesn't, again, have to be a big, massive thing, but just count your victories and use them to, you know, fuel future endeavors. So, anybody else have anything before we wrap it up?
It's been a pleasure to be on here. Thank you, guys.
Sweet. Well, it has been a pleasure. It's been a great year. I want to thank my honored guests for tuning in and being a part of the season 3 finale. So you guys just hang out a minute after I wrap this up. Don't go anywhere so I can, you know, bid you a proper farewell. But for everybody that is listening, watching today, thank you for a wonderful season 3 of the Random Heathen Ramblings podcast. We wouldn't be here if it wasn't for all of you. So until we talk again in season 4, may the gods continue to notice you, and may your ancestors smile upon you. Thank you all.